I'm gonna pick on Bungie here. I think both positively and perhaps 343, perhaps negatively. So apologies to both studios if I get this wrong. I remember when Halo was coming out, the designers, or sometime after it came out, the designers talked about these verbs, and they were like, "Look, you can throw a grenade, you can melee, you can shoot, and we want players regularly doing all three of those things." It doesn't mean every player that plays is going to do all of those things. Maybe someone will go through the whole map and just shoot, but broadly, we want all of these to be options that are regularly at the player's disposal. And what you see is when you see someone who knows how to play Halo going through even a very basic map, they're doing all of those things. They're shooting, they're meleeing, they're throwing grenades, and it feels very natural to the way the game plays. And there were other elements that made Halo, I think, feel like Halo. And I remember when I got to, because I'm a huge Halo fanboy going way back, but the later ones haven't been as great for me. I think it was, I was playing the Halo Infinite campaign. And no, was it 5? Maybe it was 5. Halo Infinite was the open world one, right? Yeah. Okay. Infinite was the open world. Okay, so it's Halo 5. It was one before that. I'm playing Halo 5, and I start doing the campaign, and I have a team of Spartans around me. And already that feels just incredibly weird. Like, sometimes I moved with Marines, but having other powerful Spartans, and then I got killed because I was like, what in the world? There's these Spartans around me, and I just started trying to rush through the level, and I got killed, and someone came over and revived me. And I was like, what's going on? I don't even. This is super. I think I ended up at some point after they revived me, like for the 5th time, because I started to see like, wait, does this just keep happening? And I kept putting myself in bad situations that I just threw myself off a cliff to see if that would end up, if I could actually die. And that worked, I think. But there was this thing of it didn't feel right, and the verbs weren't right. Like there was something about this that wasn't clicking. It didn't feel like a Halo experience, and as someone who'd been playing Halo since 2001 or whatever, that was it really rubbed me the wrong way. And it felt like, to your point around doing the homework and doing the prototypes, like, did you test this with players who liked Halo? Or were you trying to hit some other audience with this or something? Because this doesn't feel right. And it's like, oh, I got like a boost and there's different things. But I also felt like I remember playing some of those levels because I played all the way through that campaign. I almost just speed ran it once I realized how it worked. I was just like, okay, I'm just going to, hold forward on the control stick and just go for it. Yeah. And but it almost wasn't fun. It almost felt like work. And there were so many times where I felt like I didn't have my tools available. Like my melee wasn't powerful enough, or it just had to do a lot of shooting in this one. The grenades didn't seem to work. Like and it was these little subtle things where, to me, one of my conclusions was like, you didn't understand Halo before you made this. Or again, maybe you were targeting something different, and I'm the dinosaur, right? But that was the vibe I got, was like, you missed what Halo was.
I think, the easy answer is some designer didn't understand Halo, because I agree with your critique, and it's possible it was a designer. The more interesting answer to me is some producer insufficiently framed that subphase as to a time where we really needed to dig in and evaluate, does this really work? If some designer basically got a bunch of kudos for stapling a thing that sort of interfered with sort of what makes it fundamentally work, like there might have had really strong organizational incentives to basically be like, I guess I succeeded. So to better answer your previous question, like, I do think it's critical to have some concept of a lead scientist, and that the lead scientist, be it a design director or game director, you really are indirectly feeding them the prototypes to see, like, have we reached a critical mass of sort of like team grasp that we're ready to sort of commit and move forward. And historically, that's been me. And that what I do is, when the prototypes start getting novel, I start getting nervous. That's interesting, but not impactful. When the prototypes start getting too predictable, I'm pretty sure if we add sprint or speed up sprint, we're going to have this problem. I start sort of acknowledging that I'm starting to have like a pretty strong grasp of the variables. If, we find that like we have a pretty good version of the game, and every time we sort of modify it and sort of like swing it pretty hard, it gets worse. and we just keep getting shoved back to a particular version of our game, I tend to start like preparing to wave the white flag. The thing is, like, I like reminding myself that like err on the side of feeling like I closed the door a little too soon as opposed to a little bit too late, because it's rare that I have a producer that does me the favor of basically being, look, man, like if you feel like you're really satisfied with your prototyping, we probably did too much prototyping. Like that's it's unlikely. It's unlikely that, closing the short, like the closing it, down too soon is like it happens. But like in most cases, that's also because I've been lucky enough to have had a lot of trust that if I'm the lead scientist, people realize that if I'm starting to, people know that I tend to sort of close. I tend to sort of start shutting down prototyping when I feel that we arrived at diminishing returns. But that's a tremendously high stakes role, because if your design director loves highly novel problems, if they hate shutting down, closing doors prematurely, even if they're brilliant, often, yeah, it's going to be a struggle to sort of get them to really understand that we probably should be narrowing our prototyping and sort of like really consolidating instead of advancing. I think it takes a lot of production skill to really get the team to internalize that balance and of sort of, the cost of an additional prototype in one area versus the opportunity cost in another, and the cost of upstream still asking questions while you have downstream waiting for answers. Like, I think it's really idiosyncratic to sort of like the team and leader. But if you ask me, sort of, when I'm ready, it's like it's almost sort of like when I'm less scared. Like if you're like, hey, we're gonna advance next week, how scared are you? If I'm like terrified, I'm like, oh man, I'm not ready. But if I'm like a little scared but not that scared, it probably means we're close. But that's from sheer years, and I don't think that's necessarily the objective benchmark you want to operationalize.
Well,
But
I also want to call it too. Some of this is you probably want to have a conversation with your design director, because some might be prone to go early,
some
and
some
some might
are
be prone
some are
to
risk
so.
averse. They're trying to close the
Yeah,
door too soon. That you know that they don't like the neighborhood and they're just trying to get out of it for any number of reasons, or they
yeah.
might be
Or they're
they might be
they
terrified.
could be overconfident.
Yeah,
Well, they could be. Some people could be
yeah,
overconfident, and they're just like, "Oh yeah, okay, cool. I saw a few prototypes. Yeah, I think I got a good
yeah.
grasp on
You're
this.
right.
I feel like I know what I'm doing," and they can run forward. And again, I don't mean to knock them, because they don't. It's a different problem than the designer who's okay. Do another one. Okay, do another. Hey, we've done 5,000 prototypes. Are we ready to advance yet? Right. I feel like we've gotten pretty good at predicting what's
Yeah.
going to happen.
So
There's these two extremes on both ends, and I think as a producer, doing some amount of almost assessment of like, okay, who is the design director that I'm interacting with? Where are they on that? Can I talk with them about that? Can I like, hey, are you someone who tends to jump fast? Or are you a person who tends to like come up to the ledge a little bit slowly, then back up, then get psych yourself up, and then run up and try to make that jump? Maybe take a few shots at it or something. Like it may be helpful to understand: do I need to pull you forward, or do I need to hold you back?
yeah,
In terms of providing a
well,
counterweight.
well said. I mean, my last batch, one of the things that really pushed me to advance was I started hearing notes in playtest that sounded eerily close to the thesis. And like I think I had people
Mm,
that I hadn't even pitched that were like the notes were positive and were roughly in line with what I'd been selling the team for a year organically, which is unusually good. Like it's like, oh wow, that's about as good a signal as you can get. But you're often prone to miss it if you're not paying close attention to sort of your play testers, especially outside of the design team. But to your
yeah.
point, like as a producer, it is tremendously difficult to try to like figure out if you're broadening, too much or narrowing too much or too slow or too fast. And it's very team specific. You have to understand your team deeply. And often it's why I'm so protective of like once you start prototyping, it is so existential to your team. It requires so much focus. It requires so much of having your hand on the engine, knowing sort of what's doing or it's not. That distractions and juggling too many plates is really dangerous because your team might be responding to you as a leader and getting more risk averse or overly risk seeking. That sort of like it's a really hard phase to calibrate. And in my opinion, even good design directors need perspective and need help. I like telling a story that like Guns N' Roses did not like Sweet Child of Mine and were certainly against it being the single. Like the people around them had to tell them, hey man, this is fantastic. You should put this on the album. And they're like, I guess. You mean this circus tune? Like, sure. Like it's often like when you're looking at it like all the time, like on one hand, you have unique knowledge and intuition for what it is, but on the other hand, like it can sort of bias you as to sort of, having this like weird love hate relationship with the prototyping, where it's one day it's the next great thing, and I slayed the dragon, and everyone's going to be so proud once they see it. The next day, everything we touch is terrible. I don't want to commit to any of this. And while I get that there's some like, well, we need to be patient with the creatives. That's true to a degree. Part of it's like they need your help to sort of like, find kind of like that the sort of balance within that, because prototyping, like, sometimes the prototypes win. Sometimes the noise is too high to the signal. Sometimes they sort of like trick you into thinking something's good and it falls apart in your hand. And if it's been going too long and you've had too many lumps, sometimes like the team's capacity to ask questions starts eroding faster than you think. And then people start panicking. Like suddenly people start prematurely committing. They start upscoping. They start downscoping. They're like, we need to tear everything down and go back to the hypothesis. That's normal. And I think a lot of people don't think it's normal. They end up sort of looking in the mirror and panicking, thinking that it's just them. Like most the people that I know that like have gone through this, where you're like, yeah, man, like prototyping super high stakes. The signal noise to noise ratio
Yeah.
is really messed up, and you need help, and you need to be talking to your producer, talking to your leads, talking to your business folks. To be honest, yeah.
Yeah. I love how you include that into where at this leadership layer there's sort of there is a accountability that's being held between the leaders around an ongoing conversation around like, hey, have we done enough? Is this good enough? Have we gotten too far? Have we gone not far? Like all this different, did that answer the question? And I also want to just reflect too, not in this podcast, but previously, you've talked a lot about this idea of architecture. And I think after this conversation, I have a much better understanding of what you mean when it comes to I'm trying to set up like a lot of this phase it's not just about the game, it is also about the team. It's about bringing those things together and creating the lab that will maximize our chances once we do pull the trigger on something of creating something. And I loved what you said. We're going to spend this time, whether it's a year, 6 months, 3 years, because we're going to spend this time immersing ourselves and deeply understanding the space. It will pay off. It doesn't pay off right now. It pays off when we're in production. And when we hit a weird question and we hit this strange edge case that actually becomes way more common than we thought it would be in terms of how players are interacting with something, and we have to make a change. And now the fact that we did that work and those people are still here, there are still like lead designers that were present for that phase. They are able to take those lessons and bring them forward and say, hey, based on what I remember of how we attacked this space before and the knowledge that I have and have been hopefully sharing throughout the team, path X is better than path Y for us to try to solve this. And to be able to do that with, obviously still curiosity, still openness to it being wrong, but with some confidence that we understand this. Like it's again, it's given me more depth to that idea of you're crafting so much more than just a prototype, so much more than just a game as you're doing this. If you want to like build even one game well, you have to think through all of this. And it again, it's like games are hard, video games are hard, but they're not impossible. And so anyway, yeah, no, this has been really cool.